the all-party group on trade out of poverty. So those are my credentials, but the credentials of the rest of the team are far more impressive since they've actually done the business rather than been politically involved. Now, on the 7th of March this year, President Tusk offered the United Kingdom a Canada +++ deal. He said, I propose that we aim for a free trade agreement covering all sectors and with zero tariffs on goods and addressing services. And the three pluses he mentioned were, first, continued cooperation on security and crime, second, joint programs on research, innovation, education and culture, and third, he said, I'm determined to avoid the particular absurdity that there should be disruption of flights between the UK and the EU, and to do so we must start discussions on this issue as soon as possible. Sadly, instead of saying yes, as long as it applies to the whole of the UK, the government turned down this Canada +++ deal. The main reason they gave is that a free trade area would involve more friction, not just in Northern Ireland, but on all our borders with the EU, compared with being in a customs union. Now, proponents of this view, notably the Treasury and BIS, as well as Remain supporting lobbies, assert that friction caused by customs procedures will impose huge costs, cause lengthy delays, disrupt just-in-time supply chains and undermine economic growth. These assertions haven't received the sort of critical challenge which one might expect from our commentariat. After all, these fears are inevitably theoretical. They're about what might happen if we were in a free trade area with the EU rather than a customs union. No one seems to have asked what actually happens in practice in countries which are in just such a position. If friction within free trade areas is so awful, why aren't members of EFTA, the EEA, NAFTA, and the Asian free trade areas lobbying to convert their free trade agreements into customs unions? They don't seem to be doing so. They don't seem to find it as painful as the CBI suggests it will be. And they seem to value the free trade agreements with other countries, which they would not have been able to negotiate had they been in a customs union. And why is it that comprehensive economic studies of different forms of trade agreement find no evidence that customs areas outperform free trade areas? On the contrary, they show that NAFTA, for example, has been much more trade-creating than EU, even though NAFTA is a free trade area and EU is a customs union with quite a lot of pluses. As we show in this paper, many of the problems ascribed to leaving the EU's customs area are imaginary. Customs union are imaginary. And most of the rest are exaggerated. Many are based on simple misunderstandings of how international trade works. For example, references to customs paperwork having to be checked at the border after Brexit conjure up visions of lorry drivers filling in forms which are then laboriously checked against the goods in the back of their vehicle, causing delays and queues. In fact, virtually all customs declarations are made electronically ahead of arrival at port. Most consignments are cleared within seconds of arrival. A tiny percentage are physically checked as a result of risk assessment by HMRC computers or intelligence information. And such checks may be carried out away from the borders at importers' premises or warehouses. Moreover, most checks relate to dutiable goods, illegal drugs or illegal immigrants, and are made on the basis of risk or intelligence information. And Her Majesty's Customs and Revenue do not expect any of these risks to increase or new risks to emerge as a result of Brexit. So they will not require more checks than at present. And the same is true of checks on food, plants and animals coming into this country. In any case, HMRC say, and I quote, they will prioritise flow over compliance to prevent congestion. Much has been made of the importance of just-in-time supply chains, and rightly so. I was, I think, the first industry secretary to try to promote these and other Japanese management methods in the UK in the 1990s. But we should always look at the facts. Just-in-time supply chains are not limited to the EU. They operate across customs borders. Between a quarter and a fifth of motor components imported into the UK come from outside the EU. Delays in them would have the same impact on production lines as delays in those coming from the EU. Moreover, these supply chains seem to be more resilient than often presented. We're warned that outside the customs union, especially if we leave without a negotiated agreement, there would likely be congestion at Calais, backing up across the Channel and up the M20, stopping or slowing incoming vehicles so that just-in-time car plants will grind to a halt. We certainly don't want to see such congestion. But what happens when congestion does occur? Remember, it occurs at present, when French fishermen blockade the port of Calais, when demonstrators surround the Channel entrance, when immigrants burst through the barriers, when trains break down, when snow gums up the access roads, etc. Operation Stack has been activated on 211 days since 1998, and in the summer of 2015, it was in operation for 23 near consecutive days, with delays up to 35 hours. Yet I can find no report of just-in-time factories interrupting production. They do appear to be resilient, and all credit to them. Of course, there are costs as well as benefits of being in a free trade agreement instead of a customs union. Companies would have to make customs declarations and declare the origin of goods, but the cost of these appear to be wildly exaggerated, just as benefits of being able to negotiate our own trade deals are systematically understated. Switzerland calculates that the cost of these border processes, let's say, and remember, their firms have to make customs declarations and declare the origin of their goods when they're trading with the EU, adds less than 0.1% to the cost of trade. That's a fraction of the number theoretically estimated by HMRC. The suggestion by the CBI and IOD that rules of origin add several percent to the cost of trade are particularly inflated. They seem to be unaware of a study by the WTO itself suggesting that except on isolated consignments, the costs, and I quote, of conforming to rules of origin are negligible. They seem unaware, and that is before taking account of the new REX self-assessment system introduced by the EU. I hope this report will make government and business look again at the facts and reassess their exaggerated concerns about friction within free trade areas or on WTO terms. Then we can get on and enjoy the benefits of a Brexit, which means Brexit. Now I hand over to the rest of the team, or rather to Jacob, to marshal the rest of the team to hear from practitioners. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to welcome Sir David Ord to speak next. Yes,
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Ord. In 1990... Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear? Yep. My name is David Ord. In 1991, my business partner and I purchased the port of Bristol. That was immediately after the rather upsetting 70s and 80s when ports were known for disruptive registered dockers, delays, low productivity, etc., etc. Since 1989, when the dock labour scheme was abolished, the port sector has invested huge sums in productivity gains. And I think it's fair to say at the moment that the UK port sector is as good as any port in Europe. That may sound strange, and we don't often get the spotlight shone upon us, but the fantastic growth in international trade over the last 20 years would not have been possible without that investment. In terms of our own little operation, we handle about 10 million tonnes of various commodities, 2/3 with the rest of the world, 1/3 with EU countries. Customs procedures are smooth, they do not cause delays, and inspections are rare. It is all IT driven. There are no quill pens anymore. We pride ourselves, and I speak as for the rest of the sector in making sure that our customers have no problems getting through our respective ports. And I think it is fair to say that throughout the UK, where we deal both with EU origin and rest of the world, it is a pretty seamless activity. Obviously, there are concerns if we leave the EU, leave the single market and the customs union, and suddenly EU countries are in the rest of the world category as of now. We have a new customs procedure being introduced to replace CHIEF, which is an acronym which I can't remember, and the CDS system will come into operation in March 2019. This is being commissioned at the moment, and HMRC are confident that it will work should we leave and we have to process all current EU documentation as if it was the rest of the world. The capacity is there. So in short, I think as the port sector, we feel we have accomplished significant improvements in making it frictionless as possible, and we're confident that should the world change in March 2019, we will be able to continue that level of service.
Thank you very much indeed, David. And now it's a great pleasure to introduce again Hans Mason. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I use the microphone? My name is Hans Maas, and I'm a customs specialist from the Netherlands. What surprised me, looking at the discussion about Brexit, is all the things that were not mentioned. There is an opportunity to use the existing customs system within the EU and within the UK to make transparent borders across the North Sea and across the Irish Sea and north-south on the island of Ireland. There is the transit system that can provide declarations to be made inland at the premises of the exporter and inland on the premises of the importer. You don't need any stops at the border. This system is available for 20 years and it's not been discussed, which is unusual. There's also a traces system which works very fine to follow agricultural goods, veterinary goods and phytosanitary goods. It defines very clear where traders have to, where goods are traded from one certified trader to another, all through Europe. That can be used by the UK after Brexit as well. And Peter Lilly already mentioned the REX system. It's a very simple system that is being introduced globally, also as in the UK, to state in a very simple way on your invoice the origin of the goods. And by the way, the UK is the country, the member state, with the most registration so far within the European Union. I would like to mention one thing in the withdrawal agreement. If you look at Annex 3 of the Irish Protocol, you'll see that the government is proposing to reintroduce wet stamps. So there will be a form called a UK movement certificate with a wet stamp that will have to be used by IMAN exporters to prove that goods are of EU or UK origin or have been imported. I have not seen a wet stamp since 1992. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now it's a particular pleasure to welcome John Mills to speak to us.
Well, thank you very much. You may know me probably more as the founder of Labour Leave than involved in international trade. My day job, for all the years I've been involved in the discussions about the European Union, has been building up a consumer goods company which now trades with 85 countries across the world and moves about 2,000 containers a year from one place to another. So I have plenty of experience of what it's actually like to operate inside the WTO type of regime, which actually covers about 80% of all the container movements that we're responsible for. And I have to say that our experience bears out everything you've heard so far from the speakers on the platform here and what's in this excellent document. The amount of difficulties we have, the amount of delays and hold-ups we have, is really minimal. The retail world in which I operate is not an easy one, but one of the problems we really don't have is not being able to get hold of the goods when we need them, and to be able to rely on customs clearance taking place pretty quickly so that we don't get held up. We are, in fact, in one sort of industry where just-in-time is just as important as it is in the car industry. If we're running big promotions and can't get the stock, we're in trouble, but we don't have those difficulties. And this is why I think this paper is so important. Because I think this country is being scared into assuming that if we have a no deal, if the withdrawal agreement doesn't go through, that we're in for a sort of Armageddon of difficulties. And I think that one of the major difficulties that many people are scared about is that trade between the UK and Europe will be severely disrupted. And all I can say is that my experience suggests that that will not be the case. And it does seem to me that we're making difficult decisions in this country. To do so on the basis of false information is exactly the wrong way to go about it. And the clarity that this document puts forward and the explanations and the detail it provides about how relatively easy it is to get this right, I think is very important. So I very strongly support this document that's in front of you today.
Thank you, and now thank you, Simon Boyd.
I'm Simon Boyd, Managing Director of Reed Steel, John Reed & Sons. We were founded in 1919, and in our 100 years of, near 100 years of trading, we've exported to over 140 countries across the world. We work throughout the UK, and despite what everybody thinks about the single market, we've had nothing but difficulties in trading within the EU due to protectionism. The customs union has been very bad for us, along with the single market. These have held businesses like us back, and we face significant tariff barriers to getting our goods into India, the Far East, some South American places, and areas of the Middle East. And we work in some very difficult places in the world. As I say, we are designing, we're manufacturing, creating jobs in the UK using British steel, exporting that product all the way right across the world. We're 4 times winners for international trade, to give you some kind of idea of what we do. And we're a medium-sized business, and we are really concerned that we are not going to get the clean Brexit that businesses like us need. And not all businesses in the CBI are singing from the same hymn sheet. I'm in the CBI, I sit in the Manufacturing Council, and I can't get out of the European Union quick enough or cleanly enough. And I'm really worried at what's going on in government today with Prime Minister's plan, which would be a complete betrayal for what we have all worked for and fought for many, many years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon, and I hope you all noted that he is on the Manufacturing Council of the CBI, so not everybody on the CBI wants us to sell out to Brussels. Now, real pleasure to have the right on David Davis to speak to us, who I think you all know.
Thank you, Jacob. A week ago I described myself as the former Brexit Secretary. Now I suppose I'm the former Brexit Secretary. I feel slightly intimidated by the qualifications of everybody else on this panel. Mine are much more mundane. I mean, many years ago, before I was a Member of Parliament, I did operate businesses across borders, some of them much more difficult than the EU border, across the Canada-USA border, for example. And as a result, when I listened to the sorts of critiques that we are having about our future border arrangements, I just thought they were out of the realm of what I consider to be anything like practical or sensible. So I'm really pleased to be here today to support this paper, which has Peter Lilly's characteristic clarity, simplicity and focus in its addressing of the problem. Now, the premise behind it all, I guess, is that a free trade agreement is much, much more important than a customs union. Maybe the best demonstrator of this sort of was at the back of Peter's mind when he talked about being our minister that dealt with the Uruguay round. Since the Uruguay round came into effect, we have actually been less successful at exporting the European Union than many members of many countries that are not members of the European Union, and not just small ones like America as well, who have had a much more successful record. And so for them, the customs barrier around the European Union, the common external tariff barrier, was not a problem. And this is also true, I think, just looking through the document at what on page 12, I think it is, that the costs and problems of crossing a customs barrier are not even significant in the just-in-time sphere, because you see there the large amount of the just-in-time provision for our industries comes from outside the European Union now, let alone before. So we've seen massive overestimation, massive exaggeration of the problems of dealing with a modern customs system. And I stress modern customs system. I mean, customs systems in the last 20, 30 years have got faster and faster, more and more efficient, cheaper and cheaper. Hardly surprising. Your mobile phone today works much better than it did 20 years ago, and so does your customs system. And this is an answer not just to the technical economic problems, but to the political problems. The answer to the Northern Ireland issue, which you heard the ERG talk about a few weeks ago, is similarly straightforward as you're seeing in here with respect to other customs issues. So this paper goes right to the heart of two of the largest problems that the government imagines it sees in the deal with the European Union. It will deal with Northern Ireland, and it will deal with the primary friction, if there is a friction, in our trade. And what it shows very, very clearly is there are practical answers to the issues of leaving the European Union, which do not require us to give up our sovereignty, do not require us to give up our freedom, do not require us to stay inside the customs union forever, but actually allow us to be a free country once more. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's now some time for questions, but the message that you must have heard so clearly this morning is that there is another way. And that's really important, because there's been this feeling that all that can be done is what the government is suggesting, there's nothing else, it's this way or no way. But actually, there is a well thought through, practical, and already available set of systems that could be used. And I think that's the key message from these great experts who are dealing with these matters on a daily basis. So thank you for listening to that, and I'm now very happy to open it up to questions if there are any. So who's going to go first? You want me to go to the BBC first?
Thank you very much. Isn't the truth that you've won the argument for Brexit, but you've lost the argument now on how we leave the European Union? And if you can't persuade 47 of your colleagues to write letters in the way that you have to try to unseat the Prime Minister, then why should the public think that you've got the first idea how to organise Brexit?
Well, thank you for a very direct and straightforward question. The ERG does not have a collective view, as I've always made clear, and people will come to their own decisions on leadership. But actually what we're seeing from the government is a deliberate decision not to deliver a proper Brexit, but we have a government led by Remainers that want to keep us tied in to the European Union as tightly as possible. The Prime Minister, in her statement on Friday afternoon, said this was the deal she had always wanted, and the deal that she's got is not a proper Brexit. So that's the thing to bear in mind. As for letters, patience is a virtue, virtue is a grace, etc. And we shall see where the letters come in due time, and there's a meaningful vote as well, and we'll see what happens with that to a government that seems to have alienated its confidence in supply partners. However, I'm going to try and keep questions for the rest of the panel rather than for me. If anyone has questions for me, we can go to those perhaps privately afterwards. Please.
If I may, Paul Brand from ITV News. One for you, Mr. Rees-Mogg, and one for Mr. Davis. David Davis, it looks as if the Prime Minister is coming up with a compromise on the Irish backstop, which has been discussing with colleagues like Ian Duncan-Smith, using some of the technologies that you wanted to use when you were Brexit Secretary. If she does bring forward that kind of compromise, would you be interested, and would it persuade you to back the deal? And Mr. Rees-Mogg, if I may, aren't you the ones now lacking the confidence of your colleagues? The longer you go with that 48 letters, the less credibility your coup has.
Right, yeah, that's good. Well, firstly, I hope you're right about, shall I stand? I hope you're right about the compromise on the Northern Ireland border, because that is a material movement forward, and so I hope that's what happens. But it isn't by itself enough. There's also the question of regulatory compliance as well, and that is very important to our future businesses. We are likely to be in the lead in things like artificial intelligence, genetics, and so on. We cannot be a world leader in those industries if somebody else writes the regulations for us. Similarly, it is not just the Northern Ireland border issue that determines when we get out of the customs union. It is also the question of the customs arrangements, the so-called future customs arrangements that the government proposed. Many people think, and Hans may want to talk about this, many people think this is either impossible or will take 5 or 10 years to put in place. That is also unacceptable. So it's great news if you're right that the Prime Minister is willing to move on the Northern Ireland issue, as I'd hoped she'd done some time ago, but I also want to see a move on other fundamental ones too.
Well, indeed, as I mentioned, these existing systems can be used they're ready to be used. I gave witness to the House of Commons, and I said there that within the transition period, so end of 2020, we can have all these customs formalities up and running. That's no problem, but we should start today.
Thank you. One of your colleagues sitting also in the front row knows that coup is entirely the wrong word. Indeed, it's a rather silly word, because what I have done and what others have done is use the democratic process within the Conservative Party to say we have no confidence in the leader of the Conservative Party. This is not an illegitimate process, it's one set out in the rules. And this type of language, this over-egged language, is rather damaging to political debate because it tries to see things in terms that are not realistic and not true. It is just like a general election in a way. That is a legitimate means of changing leader. And using legitimate means is completely proper. And people will then make their decision. Do 47 want to come with me or not? Now, I may find that they don't. Or that they don't do it today, but they do it when we get the meaningful vote. That is a decision for them. In politics, you have to set out your stall. You have to say what you believe in. And you then see whether people agree with you or not. Fortunately, in a democracy, it is not given to insist that people follow you, and that is one of the great virtues of our system. I'd better come to the other coup-monger sitting in the front row.
David Davis about this report, but before I do, Jacob Rees-Mogg, if I could just ask you, as you say, you admonished me last week to say that you were stating a coup against Theresa May. Certainly not succeeded. Doesn't that have more of a sort of dapsant about it?
I've always admired Captain Mannering. David Davis.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
No, I'm now
I'm going to say, yes.
about this report. So David Davis and Peter, this is very late in the day to be putting forward such a detailed report. Is it your hope that if Parliament votes down this deal, Parliament will then return and look at this sort of idea and embrace this sort of idea?
Well, you say it's late in the day. August before last, which is what, 14, 15 months ago, I signed off a policy report on future customs arrangements and on Northern Ireland. And actually they covered many of the issues that this report needs to. What this report does is knock down the arguments against what was called MaxFact, the accelerated customs arrangements, and knocks down the arguments against having a practical and sensible arrangement in Northern Ireland. So it's not that late in the day. Yes, I do hope that once Parliament turns down the current proposal, we return to these sensible proposals.
Do you want me to? Yes, I would hope that if Parliament turns down what the government is proposing, then they will go back to the EU and say, can we take up the offer you made on the 7th of March and negotiate on that basis, as long as it covers the whole United Kingdom. They will either say yes or no. If yes, good. It can be done very briefly. Free trade deals normally take a long time because countries start with 10,000 different tariffs and 10,000 different regulations, and they have to equate them. We start, have to get rid of 10,000 tariffs and get them down to zero. We start with zero tariffs, we want to end up with zero tariffs. That can't take more than 10 minutes. The other thing that is required is equating or rendering equivalent your regulations and removing those which are an obstacle to trade. We start with identical regulations. That can't take very long. The main thing, therefore, is to negotiate an agreement as to what happens if one or other side changes their regulations. That exists in Canada and other type deals. That is more complicated, but doesn't take a huge time. So it could be done in the time available. If not, we leave on World Trade Organization terms, and then we're in a much stronger position, actually, to negotiate such a deal with the EU, just as Canada was on WTO terms when it negotiated its deal with the EU. Better to do it before, but if not, try and do it afterwards.
We'd better go to the Telegraph. We've been very silent so far.
Chris Hope, Telegraph. Mr. Rees-Mogg, what would it take you to withdraw your letter? Would it take adopting this report? And David Davis, have you put your letter in yet?
I'm sorry, those questions have nothing to do with today's report, but I will answer any questions anybody has on other matters later on. So would you like to ask a question about the report, or shall I go to...
If this report was adopted by the government, would that be enough for the ERG to tone down the rhetoric and move on?
The Prime Minister said yesterday that what she said is what she said and she's not going to change it. So I think that's too hypothetical. Unless, David, you like that?
I think we are in a house of God. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner that repenteth than over 99 just men who have no need of repentance. So let us hope that everybody coalesces on a sensible view.
Yes, please. I refer to the answer I gave to the Telegraph a moment ago. If anyone wants to talk to me about other matters, I'll talk to them later. Let's stick to the report here. Any other? No. Well, we'll come back to you later. We'll have people who want to ask questions about the report. Anyone want to ask a question about the report? Yes, please.
Former Brexit secretary. Looking back now, the Prime Minister made a statement for the Brexit plan. Did she use you and your successor as a representative to try and cover her during the negotiations? Mr. Rees-Mogg, just in terms of what's happened over the last couple of days, the problem is now is that what you've done botched attempt to get rid of the Prime Minister has now enhanced her authority in the eyes of your colleagues rather than diminishing her. She is now enhanced her authority.
Well, I refer you to the answer I gave to Channel 5 News and to the Telegraph.
No.
Right. Any more? Yes, please.
Sorry, speak a bit more slowly. Say again.
Sorry, you write in some time that we could get no deal and arrange a free trade arrangement during a transition period. Before we could get no deal, there is no transition.
Look, there are a whole range of no deals, from a straight absolute no deal with no arrangement whatsoever, through a bare bones no deal, much more likely, through a no deal which includes an implementation period and so on. So all possibilities.
Thank you. I think that, yes, at the back, yes, please.
Chief is going to be replaced by whatever is CDS. And hopefully that's all on time, and that will have the capacity to handle all the extra declarations that will need to be made when EU trade becomes third-party trade. I wasn't quite sure what the final sentence of your sentence... No, That's fine. It's not that we need new technology. We need to take advantage of the opportunities that exist in existing union customs code for us trading with them, and our own customs code, which we're obviously free to alter, for others trading with us. I referred to a statement that was made at the recent conference of CLECAT, which is an organisation that comprises 19,000 firms across Europe dealing with logistics, customs and so on, and they handle 80% of customs transactions. And the chairman there said all the ingredients to ensure a smooth exit process of the UK from the EU, and which allow almost frictionless trade after the exit, are already available. So we have to make use of them. Probably enhances
Well,
that.
the customs system that we've been referring to is universal. It's the same all over Europe. So it applies to Dover and Calais. We should not have any custom delays at Dover or Calais. There's no space. 5-meter-high fences, 5 kilometers inland because of illegal immigrants, the White Cliffs of Dover. So trade should be fulfilling its customs obligation inland. From Cologne to Coventry, you can drive without any formalities. And the same can be applied to Northern Ireland. We don't need any infrastructure at the border. And that can help solve the backstop.
Thank you. I think there was one more question. Yes, please.
Well, she is not alone in having said that. The Chancellor said it and Mr. Varadkar said it. I've repeatedly asked the Chancellor and his officials for the point in the WTO or World Customs Organization rules that require that. They keep promising to give it to me and they never do. So I assume that they are over-interpreting the organization's rules. The rules certainly mean that you can't discriminate between different countries or different suppliers. But you can have different procedures at different ports. Some ports are open 24 hours a day, others not, and that sort of thing. And so you might have different procedures on the Irish border from what you have on the Dover-Calais approach. So I'm afraid you will have to ask her, what's the text she's referring to?
And thank you. This really is the last question. Yes, please. I'm going to say once again, that's really the wrong type of language. We've heard clearly from the Prime Minister, and this is an area where I completely agree with her. Let us use moderate language about these serious political matters. Knights of the Long Knives conjures up all sorts of unpleasant images, and particularly, dare I say, coming from German television, is entirely unsuitable for modern political discourse. Thank you all very much for coming. There will be opportunities to speak to members of the panel now, and I'm extremely grateful for your attendance. This paper really does put the alternative case, and it's a very strong one. Thank you.